So, welcome everybody. My name is Ken Russell. I work with the Contract Research Unit in ATU in Sligo. We are mentors for SE's Sustainable Energy Community Programme. Along with me here tonight, helping out is Paul McNamara and Mel Gavin, colleagues here in the AT in the CRU. So we're going to just look at the government's call for responses to the Climate Action Plan 2024, which the SECs have an important part to play. So we're going to look at the purpose of this webinar is to create awareness and empower communities to engage with this process. Not just this process, as other ones as well. It's an important platform, and to encourage citizen engagement and to highlight areas where your expertise, our expertise and evidence is very important for the formation of this new climate action plan. So the session is being recorded and there's a questions and answers box down beside the leave button. Don't press the leave button, and where you can pop in questions, and we'll let it flow for a little bit, and myself and Mel will attempt to respond and give some information on your questions. So just the agenda for this evening, we're going to look at, just going to walk you through where you get the document, what documents we're talking about, the aims of the 2023 Climate Action Plan, a review of the 2024 consultation, with a focusing on areas where the SEC program from deals with more built environment, just transition, the electricity, and then at a discussion and making a submission. So where can you access the consultation details? This is the link here. We're going to pop it into the chat now. You can follow that on your browser. The deadline for this is actually next Friday, so it's quite a short lead-in, but you still have time to make a decent contribution. So if you follow the link, you get to the consultation platform. You'll have to register. You can register as an individual or as an organisation. You can write your thoughts or responses to questions by email, or you can send it by post if that suits you. We'll circulate the consultation document, the 2023 Climate Action Plan, and its associated annex of actions after this webinar to the emails. So where are we along the road? There was, prior to the 2023, there was the 2021 Climate Action Plan updated annually. The 2023 has its annex of actions, which sets out the more a management plan of how it will be implemented, measurable, and who will be responsible. We're at the next stage. We're at the call for expert evidence, and this is what we're looking for, to get SECs to make some sort of an input to the call. So the aims of the Climate Action Plan 2023 and the annex of actions it's the roadmap to achieve our 2030 emissions reductions. It aims to strengthen governance, to implement the carbon budget and the sectoral emission ceilings. And as I said, the annex of actions, it focuses on specific timelines, steps needed, measures, and assigns clear lines of responsibility. The government are looking for you to invite you to consider cross-sectoral and sectoral specific implications for the overall increase in climate ambition, and they want to hear your evidence-based views grounded in comprehensive sectoral perspectives. So the document itself, it looks at the first two chapters, cover the broad area. The next number of chapters look at the specific sectors with ceilings. It introduces the areas, puts it in context in relation to the Climate Action Plan 2023, and it shows the direction of travel for 2024. And really, what we're looking at here is the questions. There's a number of specific questions. I think there's 120 question marks within the document itself. And we'll look at those. I'm not going to go through each one of these one by one. We will look at certain sectors with more relevance to communities, but certain areas for the purpose of this webinar we haven't looked at, but we cover most of it. So the sectoral emission ceilings is the total amount of permitted greenhouse emissions for each sector of the economy can produce during a specific period. You've got your three successive carbon budgets, 21 to 25, 26 to 30, and 31 to 35, with your reductions for each sector over on the right. So this is the questions. These are the two questions within this section, within this topic. The questions in general they're not simple yes/no questions. They're sort of looking for in-depth answers, I guess. They require a bit of thought and a bit of research. I'd recommend, if anybody's looking to answer some of these questions, that they refer back to the Climate Action Plan 2023 and the Annex of Actions, just to contextualise what you're answering. So the two questions here: what do you view as the key actions required to ensure the emissions reductions targets set out in the sectoral emission ceilings are met? And what do you view as the main challenge obstacle in the sectoral emission ceilings being met? So these questions require a bit of thought. In the carbon pricing and cross-cutting issues, this area looks at areas that don't have immediate or direct emission impact, but nonetheless are required for us to meet our targets. So the questions here are, there are a number of questions here. I can't remember 3 or 4, but these are two examples. Are there any unintended barriers within the planning system that should be addressed at a national policy level in order to deliver our climate ambitions? Are there any other cross-cutting issues that should be considered in the development of the 2024 Climate Action Plan? So on now to the various sectors. Electricity, where there's a 75% reduction required by 2030. The 2023 Climate Action Plan identified 27 key areas. The main areas of where we're going to produce this renewable energy: offshore wind, onshore wind and solar, with the figures there. And some of the questions, again, look at the consultation document for a complete set of questions. So what financial incentives are needed to increase renewable generation capacity? A, to incentivise commercial scale production, and B, to incentivise micro-generation. This question is relevant to SECs looking at their own renewable energy generation. So perhaps that's one question we could look at, or you could look at on behalf of your SEC. What role could carbon capture and storage have in decarbonising our power sector? What measures might be taken to improve the resilience of the electricity system to system impacts of climate change? What role does renewable gas have in the power generation sector? So these are just some examples. Refer to the documents. You get more. You'll get more questions that might be more answerable to you or your SEC. Again, they're not. There's a bit of work in anyone, and we were speaking about it earlier. Even if you tackle one question and answer it well and in depth, it would add greatly, I guess. So industry emissions from industry sector reduced by approximately 1/3 between 2005 and 11. However, it rebounded later in the decade. The Climate 2023 targets was to expand and enhance support from SEI, IDA, and Enterprise Ireland. Reduce Ireland's annual industrial emissions from 7 megatons of carbon equivalent in 2021 to 5.7 between 23 and 25. Again, some of the questions here, just to delve deeper into the document: what measures can be taken to facilitate the achievement of carbon neutral low temperature heating targets set out in COP23 and manufacturing sector? What other opportunities exist to drive the decarbonisation of the industry sector? Are there areas of industry that Ireland should develop in response to climate change? Built environment, one of the most relevant to SECs. We deal a lot with retrofitting and domestic energy. So just to recap on the Climate 23 aims to phase out fossil fuel, to retrofit 500,000 dwellings to be or B2, develop district heating, to introduce new regulations for construction, retrofit and renewable energy installation in buildings, to build environmental heat delivery task force. So these are just some of the examples of the aims. The built environment is split into residential and commercial, and you've got your baseline of 2018 with your incremental reductions in the two carbon budget in this carbon budget and the next. So it's larger in residential and a bit smaller, and then a bit smaller in commercial. So there's a list of questions here. I'm not going to read them all out here. It's they've continued on the next page. So just the first one: what further support can be put in place to address the split incentive for when retrofitting rental properties, residential or commercial? How can we encourage SMEs to upgrade the energy efficiency of the buildings they own? What immediate actions can we take to address the skills shortage in the construction sector? It goes on to ask about district heating. Later on, it talks about it looks for input on geothermal. So there's just the third question down: what supports are required to retrofit of traditional pre-1940s and heritage buildings? This is something that crops up with a lot of communities. So in the transport sector, the document looks at this framework of avoid, shift, improve, and it's looking to add to the 2023 document in 2024 with these are examples of some of the questions. The avoid measures: what changes should be considered in relation to the management of roads and urban centres to reduce congestion and support the prioritisation of more sustainable modes of transport? One of the shift measures: what measures and supports are needed to ensure the effective development of shared mobility options and hubs? And the improved measures: what specific measures should be applied to deliver additional emissions reductions and improve energy efficiency in the transition of our vehicle fleet from fossil fuel? The agricultural sector, it's just a flavour of what's contained in the document. It looks back at 2023, where it sets out to look at abatement opportunities identified with Teagasc to diversify land, to harness bioeconomy, to look at better management of the land resource of peat and soils, and to develop a cluster of exemplar practice. The agricultural sector has its figures for the next two carbon budgets over on the right, and examples of the questions in the document. What policies and measures would be needed to support farmers diversify their farm activity, include opportunities such as bioenergy, vegetable growth, forestry, organic farming? What can be done to maximise the use of grass, manure and silage as feedstocks for biomethane generation or processing through biorefineries? What other opportunities exist to support decarbonisation of the agricultural sector? Moving on from this specific sector, the just transition, climate. This is an area quite relevant to SEC's Climate Action Plan 23 identifies that delivering a just transition is based on recognising the transformational level of change required to meet the targets and having a shared understanding that the transition is fair, just, and that the costs are shared equitably. So this is a screen grab from the annex of actions. Again, this should be referred to in answering the questions. I'm not going to read all the just transitions questions, but what one can we pick out? Are there any emerging areas of vulnerability in specific sectors of the economy as a direct result of the implementation of Ireland's climate action policies? So that's that's just a run through of some areas specific to this document. Have we had any questions or answers, Mel?
Ken, no, we haven't had any questions. There was an initial question, someone who was having trouble getting in. I hope that person did. I know Paul was sending on links, but we haven't had any written questions. So we can keep that open now if anyone has any questions or thoughts to refer to some of the points that Ken was making. It is a big document. The deadline is next Friday, so it's Friday week. Nobody is expected to answer all questions. The language being used there is that they're looking for, it's a call for expert evidence, and they're looking for evidence-based responses. Your experiences as SECs, and probably in your professional lives as well, your experience is evidence. So don't neglect the value of that. Getting feedback here from SECs, even if it's only on a few points, would be valuable to the overall community motivation in the climate action plan. So there's nothing wrong with putting a short response in. Don't feel like you have to answer every question.
Exactly. The logic of reading out some of the questions was to show how chunky they are, how clunky they are. It's not, there's no yes, no, and it just in my own experience working on SECs, especially around the built environment, there's, we all have views on them, and it's important to get them down on paper and put them in. Mel, did anything jump out at you in anything that we went through that might stimulate thought in people's minds?
Well, in the agricultural sectors, we have a lot of we have a lot of SECs who are rural based. We have some SECs that are basically a collection of farmers, and we know that they keep getting hit in media sound bites, keep getting blamed for all of the climate woes, and we know that it's a challenge. But there were specific questions around the questions of how do we encourage transition in farms, how do we encourage different farming methods, and I'm sure people on the ground, farmers themselves, would have some thoughts on that. There's also there was a specific question in there in agriculture on the opportunities for agricultural feedstocks towards the production of biomethane. So again, farmers may have some thoughts as to where they would fit in that. How would they be motivated? What would work for them in terms of a business plan if somebody wanted to use grass silage for a couple of years from some of their fields in an AD facility to produce biomethane? How would that work for them? So I think that a lot of individuals would have experience, evidence-based experience on that. And certainly some thoughts.
Yeah. And again, within the document, we didn't, for the purpose of this presentation, we didn't touch on the marine, we didn't touch on the circular economy, on local authority or research. These are all areas that people might have more to input. So it's a snippet of it.
Yeah, there is an opportunity there for for coastal communities to make to give their thoughts on accessing the marine environment, what impact that may have on them, how would they like to participate in that. We do have an anonymous question now, and it is, how do I submit a response? So if you want to just go back to that slide, Ken.
Yeah.
And I assume we'll be sending these slides to anyone who's registered. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. We'll send the slides with this, so you can You can follow the link. I think we've dropped it in the chat. It will be on the slides when we send it around. The clunky one at the top, gov.ie. That one will bring you to the page. You know, for me, we've applied to some of these before. The simple email I find is even just as good, and you don't have to do any email verification. You can just send to that email address from your own email address. That would suffice, and it's simpler in my view. So that's how that's done. And just, I suppose, with that same question, just the guidance again, just to refresh, to recap. Just focus on giving evidence-based questions. You know, you don't have to have published 10 scientific papers. Working with communities is an education in itself. So you've got a lot of information, you've got a lot of experience of this. Read the associated documents, liaise with people in your SEC, within your community, or the network through ourselves. You can contact us. My email is at the end. You know, other SECs that might have similar profile, but I'm aware that the deadline is quite close. So I don't. So Mel, if there's
no other questions at the moment, Ken.
That's okay. I guess then we'll wrap up, unless I hope that gave a flavour of the document, and it's worthwhile. Even one question is worth putting something in as on behalf of your SEC. So thanks everybody for joining in.